In our series of pre-election interviews, we turn to a candidate for mayor. Most recently, her focus has been on efforts to slow the spread of COVID-19, especially the Delta variant, as well as a push for more disclosure about the handling of allegations against Boston police officers. We'd like to welcome the City Councilor from District 4, Andrea Campbell. Thank you very much for being with us, Councilor.
Thank you for having me.
Councilor, I want to start with the vaccination problems here in Boston. We have a gap in terms of people getting vaccinated, and we also have this debate about whether people should be masking in more locations or showing proof of vaccination. What kind of changes would you like to see from the present course?
We have a lot more work to do. And if folks are not following this, they need to. The Delta variant, of course, is very scary. There's an uptick across the country in COVID-19 cases, infections, and deaths. We're also seeing an uptick in infection rates in the city of Boston. And we know the number one way to protect yourself, your community, and your family is getting vaccinated. And so we need to continue to do the work of getting folks vaccinated, including in my neighborhood of Mattapan, where the vaccination rates are extremely low. So there's a coordinated effort to make that happen. But I'm also pushing the acting mayor, and I have for weeks, to do a lot more. First, it was pushing the acting mayor and the administration to mandate that city employees not only wear masks indoors, but that we also get vaccinated. And if there's an exception that you need to qualify for medical or something else, that you get regular testing done. The second piece is the city of Boston needs to put out clear guidelines for our employers and our businesses to also do the same. Right now, they're fending for themselves. We need clear guidelines around vaccination mandates, critically important. And we need to lastly do what New York City is doing, offering incentives for folks to get vaccinated and doing everything we can to encourage that. And right now, with the measures that New York City has adopted, they've seen a 40% uptick in folks getting vaccinated. And so pushing the acting mayor to adopt these measures quickly, and really disappointed that she hasn't already.
Well, there are large organizations with hefty budgets that can check for proof of vaccination. But if we're talking about neighborhood businesses, maybe, what about them?
We're talking about large indoor spaces. We're talking about large stadiums, restaurants, and we don't want it to be burdensome. These are the municipalities across the country because more are requiring it, and of course employers as well, including employers in the city of Boston. This is about saving lives. And so there's a way to do this safely without adding any additional burden to a resident. And it does not include your grocery stores, places you need to go as a necessity, or where you might need to go to get medical supplies. But it includes these other places that we deem to be non-essential, where there's large crowds, where we know that if you mask up and you get vaccinated, you will be safe. And this is about saving lives. And that's our job as leaders in the city of Boston. And it's critically important that we exercise that leadership to protect folks, even if politically it doesn't feel good. It's important.
Another public health problem, mass and Cass, it's been going downhill for at least 7 years. What should be done now to turn that around?
We need action and we need a plan. And right now, the acting mayor and administration don't have one. I put one out in January, actually, when Marty was still our mayor, and I pushed and continue to push for the implementation of this plan, which includes someone being appointed at the mayor's cabinet level to coordinate our response in the city of Boston. This same individual would run a responder unit. Right now, you have folks who are working in siloed manner, with not sharing data, not sharing information. We need a team of folks working together. And this chief would respond and run this unit. And then we need a plan to decentralize services and to reactivate Long Island. My plan does all of these things and is very specific. And so I'm pushing for the implementation, because if we don't, this crisis will get worse. I grew up on Mass Ave, very poor in the city of Boston. I didn't have to worry about needles in my park, needles on the street, or bodies on the ground. And that's what we currently have in the city of Boston, and it's absolutely unacceptable. And I've been stressing that no resident should have to wait to the next mayoral election to get the action they're entitled to from the city of Boston.
Well, I think, like some other candidates as well, one of the best ideas, I think, is to sort of decentralize what's going on there, the burden, have it shared in other locations. But how do you get there?
You need a plan. And my plan that I put out in January articulates how we can do that by working across a wide array of stakeholders, including those who are helping place folks in supportive housing, recovery specialists, mental health clinicians, working with our community-based health centers and our hospitals, but also pushing the governor to do his part and making sure that the surrounding communities also join us in responding to this opioid crisis. So it's twofold. Yes, push the state, but there's a lot more the city of Boston can do. And so I'm pushing for implementation of my plan, which is informed by the folks who've been doing the work for a really long time. Now we need action.
I want to ask you about some of the recent demographic changes that have come out about Boston in the census. At a time when the city has growth and even more diversity, we see the Black population is going down and the population of children is going down. What does that say to you?
It says that we need to address, one, how expensive it is to live in the city of Boston. I read that same report. Housing affordability was one of the major issues. The second is we need to improve our Boston public schools. We just lost 2,000 families. It's the sharpest decline in the last 15 years. And as a counselor, I have, not only as a counselor, but as a candidate for mayor, the most comprehensive record of accomplishment on putting forth initiatives that are creating more housing opportunities and homeownership opportunities at affordable pricing points. I put out a plan 3 years ago on ways in which to close the inequities in our Boston public schools. I went to 5 excellent BPS schools. All of them were incredible. So we know that's possible in the city of Boston. We need leadership, we need action and a sense of urgency. All of the things I've been demonstrating as a counselor that I would demonstrate as mayor, if blessed, of course, to earn the support of residents, which I'm doing every single day.
I want to ask you about education in this campaign, because as usual, there's a lot of campaign donations that concern educational agendas. You have some champions of charter schools backing you. I'm sure the teacher unions are going to be backing somebody in this race. So what should people take away from that?
I don't focus on that. What I do focus on is the fact that as a Black woman running for office, it's extremely difficult to raise resources. And we know to run a grassroots operation, you have to. I'm really blessed that folks in various networks that I have, including Princeton, my legal networks, and residents in the city of Boston, have invested in my candidacy and invested in my vision for the city and in my leadership. And now I'm getting out there every single day connecting with voters and saying I'm the only candidate that has focused deeply on improving our Boston public schools and doing the work of putting on a plan 3.5 years ago to close the inequities in that system so that every family, including my own 2 boys, have access to an excellent education. That leadership will not change, not only on education, but on other issues, housing affordability, policing reform, COVID-19, the opioid crisis, and so much more. And so I'm asking voters, of course, to learn more about my candidacy, not just my personal narrative, but my record of accomplishment. And I think when you compare it to other candidates in this race, it's quite accomplished. And so my job is to get out there and to earn the support of residents all across the city of Boston.
I want to ask you about police accountability, because you are among the people who've been pushing for more disclosure, especially around allegations of sexual abuse against some of the police officers over the years. Is this about the legal entanglements and there might be some rights of confidentiality involved, or is this really about who's in charge?
It's about a lack of leadership. There is absolutely a way for the city of Boston and the police department to be more responsive and more transparent, not only to public records requests, but for any information that a resident is requesting from us. I have been at the forefront of pushing for our police department to be more transparent and to release information. In the recent accounts by media outlets, and of course by our Attorney General, who had to sue the city of Boston because our police department did not release records, it's absolutely unacceptable. Not only should they release these records, including records related to officers who may have been involved in domestic violence, release those records quickly. But I've been reminding voters that the mayor's office has the power to compel the police department to release those records. And right now, we're not seeing that leadership from the acting mayor and the administration. I'm pushing for that. If I were in that position, I would have released those records already, because we know transparency and accountability, particularly within our policing system, is critically important if we are going to engage in community policing in the city of Boston and keep our residents safe.
One more question about affordable housing in Boston. I mean, I think all the candidates agree we need more of that and maybe better pathways to home ownership. But at the same time, there is a sort of a difference. One candidate for mayor wants rent control to come back. The others do not. If not rent control, what do you think is the best hope?
I do think a couple of candidates want rent control. I have come out to say it is not a tool, I think, to be effective. I've engaged, for example, a lot of small landlords, including landlords of color who live in Dorchester and Mattapan in my current district, who provide actual rental opportunities at affordable pricing points and who have pushed back on rent control as not an effective tool. I absolutely know that we have actually all the tools we would need right within our power and authority in the city of Boston to make sure that housing is affordable in the city of Boston. Rent control is through the State House. You're going to have to find a way to get that done. There is no appetite right now. So rather than wait on the state to address our issues, my plan is quite specific on ways in which to be able to create more affordable housing, not just rental opportunities, but home ownership opportunities. I've done it as a counselor, filing legislation that's generating $20 million every year for the creation, including of affordable housing. I've brought programming into our public housing space to be able to move people out of poverty and out of public housing into homeownership opportunities. I've activated and will continue to activate city-owned vacant lots for homeownership opportunities. I've done all of that as a counselor, so I'm pushing voters to look at that record of accomplishment and to say I would continue to be intentional and creative on this issue going forward, and that all the tools and power that we need to handle this issue lie right with the city, and we have the authority to change the outcome so that everyone can afford to live in the city of Boston.
Thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Candidate for mayor of Boston, Andrea Campbell. We'll have more news in just a moment.